Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Scoop on K-State, a show about the K-State journey to becoming next-gen land-grant university, featuring insights and stories from Wildcats leading the way. I'm your host, Adam Walker, President and CEO of the K-State Alumni Association. And our guest today is Dr. Jürgen Richt, Regents and University Distinguished Professor and KBA Eminent Scholar, who serves as Director of the Center of Excellence in Emerging Animal Diseases, or CZAD, at K-State, and Director of the National Institute of Health, Cobra Center, on Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases. He holds a DVM from the University of Munich, Germany, and a PhD in virology from the University of Gießen, Germany. Dr. Richt is a highly sought-after research professional who has earned the trust and respect of his peers around the world. He recently had front-page news on his breakthrough research surrounding bird flu. Welcome, Dr. Richt. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for having me here today, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, it's quite an honor of your level and research, and so it's going to be a neat discussion talking about how your research impacts not only Kansas, but everybody around the world. First off, let's start, though. You have an interesting history with K-State. So tell everybody how long you've been here and then your interesting connection to K-State.
So I joined Kansas State in 2008, 16 plus years. And in the veterinary school, I'm a veterinarian, as you said before. And when I came to Kansas State, I got a call from my relatives. We have relatives in Omaha, Nebraska. And they asked me, Jürgen, did you know that your great aunt, Helen Richt, was the first woman ever graduating from Kansas State University College of Veterinary Medicine? So Helen Richt was the first woman graduating from this vet school.
That's incredible. So you said 1930s, and you had no idea until you got here that you had a relative who's the first female graduate of vet school.
Yes.
That's incredible.
It is. It's a very good story, and it actually makes me proud not only to continue in her legacy here at Kansas State.
So you got purple in your blood.
That's
you didn't
correct.
even know it.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, let's talk about CZAD. In your own words, maybe you should explain to everyday K-Staters about you, CZAD, and very important mission of the center.
So my interest for my entire career as a veterinarian, I became a researcher. I first was a clinical veterinarian, became a researcher, and I got interested in diseases which are called zoonotic diseases. They are transmitted from animals to humans, but also can go the other way. And many of these diseases are also emerging, new diseases, what we saw in the last years, H5N1, pandemic, H1N1, etc. So when I came here, the first center I was writing a grant for was to the Department of Homeland Security, and I got funded for the Center of Excellence for Emerging Zoonotic Animal Diseases, CZAD. And so we study these diseases from various standpoints. We want to understand, how these diseases replicate in animals, how they are shed, what kind of diseases they induce. We want to understand how can we protect animals from these diseases, so we produce vaccines. We want to understand how we can diagnose, especially when there are new diseases. We have to develop novel diagnostics and novel vaccines. And then we want to understand how these viruses or these diseases or the associated pathogens are spread. So we have to develop tools, epidemiological tools. And all these things are done in centers like CZAD or CSAD. And on top of all this is the most important part is workforce development. We train the next generation of veterinary researchers. If we don't have people who can work with animals with infectious diseases in high containment, if we don't have these people, we cannot protect our agricultural systems and we cannot protect our public health, because many of these new diseases are zoonotic in nature.
Yeah, that's very incredible. And just the impact, sometimes people think about research at a university, it doesn't impact them, but very much so, especially in your line of field, how much it impacts agricultural, human, the crossover. I mean, everybody's daily lives. It's very important.
It's very important because the public thinks that veterinarians, they just take care of animals, which is true. But veterinarians like myself who work on zoonotic diseases and how they are spread, they not only protect animals, they also protect public health and people, because these, if we understand better what's happening in an animal, we can also protect the public from diseases which come from these animals.
Yeah. So as we know, the Next Gen K-State Strategic Plan defines the university as a comprehensive research land-grant institution that serves students and the people of Kansas, the nation, and the world. Your center is certainly vital in that component of the plan. Can you explain exactly how you see your important work done through CZAD? How does it tie into the Next Gen Strategic Plan? I know animal health is a big piece of that. You've kind of explained that, but
yes,
maybe go a little bit further into how it supports that plan.
So number one, students, next generation workforce. We train students, undergraduate, graduate student, master, PhD students, postdocs. We also, my center says it especially mentors young faculty how to become successful in their own, in terms of getting grants, etc. How do we serve the state? So my center and the people who work in this center, they work mainly on livestock diseases. And livestock agriculture is a very critical part of Kansas. So if we develop novel tools like novel vaccines, novel diagnostics, etc., it really also is important for our agricultural industry in Kansas. And how do we serve the nation and the world? These diseases, the pathogens we work with, they don't know borders. So they as we saw that with H5N1 coming in to the United States in 2022, it came from the East Coast or via Newfoundland, etc., into Canada and down the East Coast. 10 years earlier, it came from Alaska down to the West Coast, and then jumped over into the Midwest. So these diseases they don't have borders. Birds don't understand borders. So if we develop mitigation strategies against diseases which I just described, we not only protect Kansas agriculture, we protect the nation's agricultural systems, and even worldwide we help fight against these devastating diseases.
Yeah, let's dive a little bit on your big discovery, your recent research into a highly pathogenic avian influenza virus known as a bird flu. Why don't you talk about that breakthrough in that process and what it means to the layperson? So what your research really meant, and I know it was big news for you and the vet school and obviously Kansas State University.
So we were also, I worked in flu, animal influenza, for 25 years, mainly in chickens, poultry, and in swine. We helped, obviously, also with our human counterparts with human influenza. We developed the tools to help them too. But until March last year, I would have never thought, and many of my colleagues, that we have an outbreak of avian flu in cattle. And this happened a year ago. It first diagnosed in Texas. It was then actually swapped over into Kansas, New Mexico, and other states. So we had many outbreaks here also in the southwest of Kansas, where we have big dairies. And the question was, this is a respiratory, influenza in humans is a respiratory virus. So it's very easily transmitted from an infected person to other people. And up to, I think, 6 to 10, if you have one infected person, he or she can infect many more others. So the first question was, is this virus in cattle also a respiratory virus, like it is described for other mammals, like humans and swine? And the answer was, we did not find a typical respiratory transmission pattern. And so we did this experiment, and we concluded it's not a typical respiratory virus. The other gap which was there, and we tried to address and answer, was in the field, when cattle were infected with this avian influenza virus, the major clinical signs was milk drop. So a cow which had a certain amount
drop in production.
Yes, drop of production, had a certain produced a certain amount of milk. After infection, 2 days later, the cow did not produce much milk, and the consistency of the milk was different. The consistency was such that you would not use it to produce whole ice cream.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not consumable for humans, so we will not eat the ice cream made with this milk because it had curds, etc., in it. So we asked them the question: what happened if we infect a lactating cow, a cow which gives milk, through the mammary gland into the teats? And what we saw was when we inoculated cows into the teats with that virus, they got sick. The milk consistency was different. It was colored milk with curds, etc., and we could replicate the clinical signs which people described from the field in dairy farms. So our conclusion out of the study, which we already did early, the outbreak was in March, and we started the studies already in April, May. And in June, we already could make the conclusion last year, June 24, that this is not a typical respiratory virus. The virus is mainly shed and transmitted in the milk, and most likely milk and milk-associated activities are critical for the spread of this virus among dairy herds in the United States.
Among the dairy, cattle. Interesting. So what did that lead to in terms of maybe the actual impact in the field? Were they able to recognize it, and that way they could know, but maybe take some precautions as well?
So it was actually good news. So I usually don't give press conferences, or I don't talk to the press before papers are published. But in this case, we went public with the data because it gave we could give advice to our regulatory agencies. If it's a respiratory transmitted virus, it's very difficult to control. If it's a milk-associated virus associated with milk-associated activities, it's maybe easier to control. That's why we went public, and my colleagues, we did these studies with colleagues in Germany, and I said, this is good news, we might have a chance to control it. And that's why we actually went public with this information before we published it in a peer-reviewed paper, which I have never done before, but it's critical for our regulatory agencies to get a handle, hopefully, how to control it better.
Talk about cutting-edge research, literally. And you're right, normally results are not discussed or publicized before it's published. But in this case, it was such an important research discovery, we needed to disseminate that information. Yeah.
And we disseminated with the New York Times, with a reporter with the New York Times. So I would usually not do that, but we decided we have to do that. It's important for the field and for the regulatory agencies.
Yeah, that's incredible. So what's the most satisfying aspect of your work, and what are your driving forces or motivations? And maybe talk about, legacy here for future generations.
Yes. I said in the beginning, so next generation workforce. So the training young people, getting them excited to do similar things, what I have done throughout my career, my people who do similar things, that's the most exciting thing about my research. You
working with peers and the next generation.
Yes, the next generation workforce. So you have students, and then seeing them to flourish. And I have the most satisfying aspect of my career is I have trained veterinary researchers in all continents except Antarctica.
Wow.
And many of them went on to great careers, and that's the most beautiful thing, I think, that you have a pedigree in terms of training these people, whether they're in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, or in South America or North America. This is, I think, the most satisfying aspect. And they keep you young because they
got questions,
they're young people, and they expect me to be to keep up with them, and that's, I think, the most satisfying aspect. The second satisfying aspect is that that the research I do and people like me do, we can have an impact on the life of farmers, on the life of veterinarians, and on public health. So this is, I think, another very satisfying aspect of my work, that I can have an impact on the farmer. Yeah. I cannot go out and say, when I go talk to farmers, I'm not talking have so many publications in this and this journal. They don't care. But I can say, I developed this vaccine you are using now for your pigs, or I developed this diagnostic test you are using now. This is the most satisfying, the translational aspects of our work, which has an impact on agricultural systems.
Yeah, that's where it really is impacting, farmers, agriculture, state of Kansas, not only us, but the world. So that's neat to see. I bet that is
And I
rewarding.
may have to add, you need to have basic research to do translational research. The better your basic research is, the more you can contribute also to translational research. Without basic research, there is no good translation.
Never thought about that, but you're right. If you can't do the basic research well, how are you going to do the advanced research?
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I never thought about it like that.
So we do both in my laboratory. We do basic research and translational.
Yeah.
And without basic research, you cannot translate much.
So last October, you had a very prestigious nomination. You were elected to the National Academy of Medicine, premier organization of scientists working in health-related fields. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
We're very proud. Can you share what being the first K-State faculty member to be elected to NAM means to you personally, and how that impacts K-State? That's a big deal.
Yes, obviously this is an award which it's not only me, it's the people who worked with me during my 30-year of career, my collaborators, my students, the people in my laboratory, my supervisors. This is obviously a culmination of all of that. And I'm very honored and humbled by it, because it's a big
recognition. How many annually, or how many is in the academy? Do you know?
I don't know. I know
it's a small group.
It depends. So veterinarians, maybe a dozen, maybe less. I don't know. Between half a dozen and a dozen veterinarians. So that's what I know. So there are not many veterinary researchers who are in that group. So that's a very small group.
Very distinguished.
Very distinguished.
Well, congratulations.
Group. So yes.
You're doing great things for K-State and obviously Kansas and the world. Anything else you'd like to share with us today? Any insights? I thought that was interesting about research, but anything else about your research and vet med? And
so people always come to me and ask, how can I have a similar career as you have, Dr. Richt? A lot of students, and that's what they want to have, advice and career advice. And I think the most important thing is, if you want to have whatever you do, you have to have your heart. It has to be part of it. If it's not part of your work, if that's not what you want to do, don't do it.
Being passionate.
You have to be passionate about your work. You have to like it. You have to like to go to work. It has to be, something you really like. And I think that's the basis. It's not what people tell you to do. It's where your heart is. That's what I tell people.
It's great advice. Yep. Well, now's the favorite part of the podcast. You've been great, but we get to share some Call ice cream, which you mentioned. So why don't you share with everybody what's in your cup? And you made an interesting selection. So why don't you share before it melts?
Okay. So it's purple.
Yeah. Purple Pride.
It's chocolate. And it's vanilla.
So you put all three together.
I put all three together.
There's an ingenuitive researcher right there, right? Why have one when you can have all three, right?
Exactly.
So I like that. I've never tried that combination. So looking forward to trying all three. So thank you so much. Jürgen, it's been truly a pleasure to visit with you. So thank you so much for everything you do for K-State, and we're so proud to have you at K-State.
Thank you very much.
Yep. That wraps up another episode of The Scoop on K-State. I'm Adam Walker, President and CEO of the K-State Alumni Association, and I want to thank you for watching and listening to the show. Till next time, be sure to share this podcast with your friends and family, select that follow button, and make sure you never miss another episode. On behalf of the K-State Alumni Association staff, we're proud to be your connection to campus. We value and appreciate your ongoing support and membership. And if you're not currently a member, please consider joining. And of course, go Cats.
Go Cats.